I need you to stay with me for the next few minutes because reports suggest something sensitive leaked less than an hour ago, and it may explain why things suddenly feel unstable in Washington. Sources indicate this is a private Republican Senate document. It is labeled for leadership eyes only. And what it says is not just embarrassing for Donald Trump. It signals that people inside his own party may believe his control is slipping fast. Before we get into it, make sure you're subscribed and notifications are turned on because if more details come out, this story could move quickly. And what I'm about to explain is not about Democrats attacking Trump. It's not about the media criticizing him. Analysts believe this is about something much more serious. Republicans quietly turning on him because they think he is dragging them into a political disaster. Here is the line in the memo that jumps off the page. According to sources familiar with the document, one sentence is marked over and over again for emphasis. It says, Greenland has cost us 11 Senate seats, not might cost, not could cost. The language is direct, like the damage is already happening, already showing up in numbers Republican strategists are looking at right now. 11 seats is not a small shift. 11 seats is the difference between holding the Senate and losing it. 11 seats is the difference between having power or becoming irrelevant. And if this memo is real, it suggests Republican leaders believe Trump's Greenland push, something many voters strongly oppose, has already wrecked their entire plan for the 2026 midterms. And here's the part that makes this even bigger. Sources indicate the person tied to this memo is not some anti-Trump Republican. This is someone who has been close to Trump politically, someone Trump supported. But before I tell you who it is, you need the full setup because what led to this memo wasn't one bad moment. Analysts believe it was three major hits in a short window, three separate public setbacks that built pressure inside the party. And the third one may have been the one that finally pushed Republican leadership into open panic. Let's walk through the three setbacks. First, the polling collapse. Most people have heard the headline number. Reports suggest major polling showed overwhelming opposition to any military action tied to Greenland. That alone is stunning. It's hard to get Americans to agree on anything at that level. But what really rattled Republican strategists, according to political analysts, is what happened when you look deeper, especially in red states. The data breakdown reportedly showed massive opposition, even in places where Trump has been strongest, states where he won comfortably, areas that are normally loyal to him. And then, according to reports, conservative media outlets ran their own checks because they assumed the first numbers must be wrong. But sources indicate those internal results still showed overwhelming pushback. And then the part that may have shocked even Trump's team. Reports suggest internal Republican polling leaked, showing that even many self-identified Trump voters do not support the Greenland escalation talk. Think about that for a second. It's one thing to lose swing voters. It's another thing when a large part of your own base starts saying, no, not this. That was humiliation number one, because it wasn't coming from the usual critics. It was coming from his own side. Now, humiliation number two, allies stepping in. This is where the story shifts from political embarrassment into something that could affect global trust. Reports suggest that several NATO countries issued a rare joint statement criticizing what they described as reckless American leadership. Analysts say this kind of direct language between allies is highly unusual, and sources indicate the wording was not just symbolic. Some experts believe it signaled growing fear inside the alliance that American decision-making could become unpredictable. And that's where the term Article 4 starts showing up. For anyone who doesn't follow NATO rules closely, Article 4 is basically a formal mechanism where member countries can call emergency talks when they believe their security is threatened. And according to multiple reports, this situation may have pushed discussions in that direction, something that would be almost unthinkable under normal circumstances. And here's what made it worse, according to analysts. Trump's response did not calm it down. It reportedly added more heat. That brings us to humiliation number three, the one that may have truly changed the calculation inside the Republican Party. Because Republicans can ignore bad headlines, they can argue with polls. They can even brush off diplomatic criticism for a while. But money is different, and reports suggest the money started moving. Sources indicate that in the days after the Greenland tension intensified, major defense-related donors and corporate-linked players began stepping back from Republican campaign giving. Now, we have to be careful here. Companies make decisions for many reasons, and not every move is political. But analysts believe the timing set off alarms for GOP leadership because these are groups that often prefer stability and predictability. And one reported detail is especially explosive. Sources suggest a key executive tied to a presidential advisory circle stepped away, and a resignation message circulated privately. If that account is accurate, it signals something important. When even people who benefit from the defense system start acting nervous, it tells Republican leaders that this isn't just politics, it's risk. And then, according to financial analysts, markets began reacting to the growing uncertainty. Volatility indicators reportedly jumped. Treasury yields reportedly moved in ways that made investors uneasy. And here's a phrase experts keep repeating: risk management. Because the story isn't just that people are mad, it's that powerful institutions may be treating Trump-linked chaos as a financial risk. So now you see the three pressures hitting at once, polls turning, even in Trump-friendly areas. Allies reacting openly, unusually, and donors and markets showing signs of fear. Any one of those would be damaging. All three in a short period is how you get panic. That is the environment where the memo appears. So who is it tied to? Reports suggest the memo was connected to Senator John Thune, a top Republican leader in the Senate, and someone who has generally been aligned with Trump on major votes. If sources are correct, this is not a random backbencher. This is leadership-level concern. And the memo, according to people describing it, does not read like a rant. It reads like math. It reportedly names 11 Senate seats Republicans believe could flip in 2026 because voters may punish them over this Greenland situation. And allegedly, it goes state by state. Places that Republicans assumed were safe are now being discussed as toss-ups. Candidates who were comfortable are suddenly viewed as vulnerable. And strategists, according to reports, are blaming one central issue: the Greenland crisis. Some insiders are even using a new label, according to sources, candidates who are being dragged down by this one controversy. And analysts say it makes sense why this hits hard. Because many voters do not follow complicated policy debates, but they do react when they feel leaders are threatening chaos. They react when they hear talk of conflict. They react when they worry their money, their stability, and their national standing are at risk. And if you're wondering why the competitor title talks about chaos nationwide, here's where that part comes in. Because what's happening may not stay inside the Capitol. Reports suggest that U.S. diplomatic channels have been sending warnings back home using language that is extremely rare. Phrases like "prepare for instability." Now, we have to be responsible with wording here. That doesn't prove a crisis is guaranteed, but analysts believe it shows serious concern inside government systems about the possibility of domestic tension rising if this escalates. And according to sources, the NATO issue may have moved beyond public statements. There are reports suggesting emergency consultations may have taken place. If true, that would be historic. And there are also reports that European defense leaders have been discussing ways to operate with less reliance on American leadership without necessarily framing it as hostility, but as preparation. Think about the symbolism of that. A military alliance that has depended on the U.S. for decades, exploring how to function if U.S. leadership becomes unpredictable. Even the idea of that tells you how shaken things could be. Meanwhile, analysts have been watching currency movement and bond behavior, and some have pointed to recent shifts as a sign that global confidence may be wobbling. Again, we need to be careful. Markets move for many reasons. But when multiple signals line up with a political crisis, experts start asking hard questions. And then there's intelligence sharing. Reports suggest certain allied intelligence relationships have been placed under extra restrictions. That is not something casual. Intelligence sharing runs on trust. And when trust falls, risks rise. Now, I want to step back for a moment and give you the bigger pattern that analysts keep bringing up, because what's happening with Greenland may not be a one-time event. Some experts argue Trump has a history of reacting strongly after public humiliation, not retreating, not calming down, but pushing harder. Think back to earlier flashpoints from Trump's first term, moments when backlash hit, and then not long after, escalation followed. There was the fallout after Charlottesville, when public criticism exploded and corporate leaders stepped away. And shortly after, Trump expanded the travel ban in a way critics saw as political retaliation. There was the Mueller report period, when Trump faced intense pressure and public embarrassment, followed later by the Ukraine phone call controversy that became his first impeachment. And then the 2020 election loss, when humiliation turned into denial, lawsuits, pressure campaigns, and ultimately the January 6th crisis. Now, you don't have to agree with every comparison to see why analysts are worried about the pattern: humiliation, then escalation. So when reports suggest Trump is now facing humiliation from every direction, polls, allies, donors, even his own party, experts are asking the obvious question: what happens next? Because if he feels cornered, does he back down, or does he strike back in a way that creates a larger constitutional fight? And that brings us to what may be the real danger point. Sources indicate some Republicans are quietly discussing formal tools to limit presidential action, like the War Powers Resolution. But here's the problem. Legal experts say these tools exist, but they have rarely been used successfully to stop a determined president. On paper, Congress has power. In reality, presidents often find ways to delay, reinterpret, or ignore. And then there's the 25th Amendment, especially the part that deals with removing a president if top officials believe he can't carry out duties. That has never been used in the most aggressive way, not once. So if the U.S. ever moved into that territory, we would be in a situation with almost no modern playbook. And that's why analysts believe we are looking at three possible paths from here. Path one, Trump fully backs down. He drops the Greenland push, stops the threats, and tries to move on. But many experts say if he does that, he risks looking weak to his supporters, and Republicans fear it could trigger political collapse in 2026 anyway. Path two, Republicans talk tough, then fold. They release statements, they complain privately, they leak memos, but when it comes time to actually confront Trump with real power, they choose party unity. Many analysts say this is the most common outcome in modern politics. Path three, a constitutional collision. Trump refuses to comply with Congress. Republicans decide they can't afford to lose the Senate. And suddenly, the fight becomes real. Votes, legal battles, maybe even Supreme Court involvement. This is the scenario nobody wants because it raises questions no one can answer easily. How far would Trump go? How far would Republicans go? Would the system hold? And now here's what you need to watch in the next few days, because these signals may tell us which path we're heading toward. First, Trump's posting behavior. Analysts often look at his public output as a sign of where his mindset is. If posts slow down, it could mean advisors are gaining control. If posts increase sharply, experts worry that escalation could be coming. Second, Republican faces on major Sunday shows. If you start seeing key Republicans doing coordinated interviews, it may mean the private panic is becoming a public push. Third, the dollar and market reaction. If currency moves suddenly and aggressively, and bond yields jump again, it's a signal global investors may be pricing in political instability. Fourth, NATO language. If official NATO statements begin including formal consultation terms in public, that would signal the alliance is treating the situation as more than a political headline. Fifth, White House staffing moves. If high-level officials leave or get removed suddenly, analysts say it can be a sign of internal conflict or preparation for a more aggressive move. And here's what I can't tell you right now, because no one can. I can't tell you whether Republicans will truly confront Trump or just complain and then surrender. I can't tell you what Trump's next move will be if he feels humiliated. I can't tell you whether this stays political, or becomes institutional. But reports suggest the next stretch of days could be the turning point, when we find out whether the system can limit a president who refuses limits. So subscribe right now, because if another leak drops, if a major Republican breaks publicly, or if allies escalate their warnings, this story could explode without warning. And one more thing. Sources indicate there may be more in that memo than just the problem. There may be a solution being discussed behind closed doors. If that's true, the most frightening part of this crisis may not be what Republicans are saying out loud. It may be what they're planning in private. So I'll leave you with this question. If Trump's own party truly believes Greenland could cost them power, what happens when they decide they have nothing left to lose?